When we talk about contamination in canned foods, most attention focuses on bacteria. But there's an entirely different category of contaminants that you can't smell, see, or taste, and that build up in your body over time. Heavy metals and chemical contaminants in canned foods represent a slow-moving health crisis that's only recently getting appropriate attention. Lead contamination is particularly concerning in older canned goods and products from countries with less strict regulations. Historically, consumes were soldered with lead, directly contaminating contents. While this practice is largely phased out in developed countries, imported products and old stock sometimes still present risks. Lead leaches more readily from cans containing acidic foods, tomatoes, citrus fruits, because acid dissolves the metal. BPA or bisphenol A lines most metal cans to prevent direct food-metal contact. But BPA is an endocrine disruptor that leaches into food, especially at higher temperatures or with acidic contents. The levels in individual cans may be low, but BPA bioaccumulates. Repeated exposure from multiple canned products daily creates body burdens associated with reproductive issues, metabolic problems, and other health concerns. Mercury in canned fish deserves special attention. Large predatory fish like tuna accumulate mercury in their tissues through bioaccumulation up the food chain. Every smaller fish a tuna eats contained mercury. That mercury concentrates in the tuna's muscle tissue, the part you're eating. Canned tuna, especially albacore, can contain troubling mercury levels. The regulatory approach to these contaminants is based on acceptable daily intake calculations. Regulators determine levels that presumably won't cause harm if you consume them daily for a lifetime. But these calculations make assumptions. They assume average consumption rates. They often don't account for exposure from multiple sources simultaneously. They may not adequately protect vulnerable populations like developing fetuses and young children. Which canned products pose highest risks? Acidic foods in metal cans risk heavy metal leaching. Canned tomato products, citrus juices, pickled vegetables. Large predatory fish accumulate mercury, so canned tuna, especially albacore, and canned salmon need mindful consumption limits. Products from countries with minimal environmental regulation might contain agricultural chemical residues that concentrate during processing or industrial pollutants from contaminated water sources. What can consumers do? Choose products in glass containers when possible. Glass is inert and doesn't leach chemicals into food. It's more expensive and heavier to transport, but it eliminates metal and plastic liner concerns. Look for BPA-free can linings. Many manufacturers now advertise this. Understand that BPA-free often means substituting other compounds that aren't necessarily safer, just less studied, but it's still probably better. Vary your fish species to limit mercury exposure. Don't eat the same fish constantly. Rotate between different types. Smaller fish lower on the food chain, sardines, anchovies, generally have less mercury accumulation. If you eat tuna regularly, choose light tuna over albacore when possible. It typically has lower mercury levels. Pay attention to product origin. Countries with strong environmental regulations generally have lower heavy metal and chemical contamination in their food supply. This isn't always true, but it's a reasonable heuristic. Products from heavily industrialized regions with minimal environmental oversight are higher risk. Understand bioaccumulation. This is crucial. A single can of soup with low BPA levels isn't dangerous. Daily soup consumption plus other canned goods plus plastic food storage containers plus thermal receipt paper exposure, all sources of BPA, creates cumulative exposure that may exceed safe limits. Think about your total exposure across all sources, not just individual products. Vulnerable populations need stricter avoidance. Pregnant women should limit canned tuna consumption and avoid high-mercury fish entirely. Young children are more vulnerable to both mercury and lead. If you're trying to conceive or are pregnant, minimize chemical exposures as much as practical. Testing data, when available, is valuable. Some manufacturers test for heavy metals and publish results. Consumer advocacy organizations sometimes conduct independent testing. Pay attention to this information. It's not perfect, batch-to-batch variation exists, but it gives you better information than no testing data. The invisible nature of these contaminants makes them insidious. You can't protect yourself through sensory evaluation. You can't smell mercury or see BPA. You depend entirely on regulatory oversight and manufacturer integrity. In their absence, your only protection is informed product selection and consumption moderation.